little tiny baby steps over time, viewing this thing that's popping up in my brain, this trigger, instead of it being like, this is a terrifying thing. Why is it popping up? I didn't realize this was going to bug me. I established the mindset that my brain finally feels safe enough for this thing to pop up, and that means it's time to heal it.
All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast. When the call hits home, this is Jennifer.
And I'm Ashlee.
And as always, we're excited about an episode, but I think we're specifically excited about this episode today. So I am just not going to waste any time and go ahead and hit it to our guests. If you guys want to share a little bit about yourselves.
My name is Madalena DeAndrea, and I grew up as a daughter of a police officer who's on the podcast with us here today. He'll tell you a little bit about his career and about himself here in just a second. I grew up with his experiences in law enforcement really being the backdrop of my childhood and influencing a lot of how I viewed the world and how I viewed my own place in it. It also influenced a lot of the skill sets and mindsets that I really took with me into young adulthood, where unfortunately I survived an active shooting, specifically the borderline bar and grill shooting in Thousand Oaks, California, where 12 people were killed, including the responding police officer. And that experience really not only highlighted for me the protective factors I'd been gifted my whole life by being the daughter of a police officer, but also really launched me into this experience of recovery and resiliency and what it looks like to get to a space of post-traumatic growth following a big T trauma. That is some of the work I get to do every day now. I work for a school district supporting recovery and resiliency in school safety. And I also travel around the country and tell my story, sometimes by myself and sometimes with my dad. So without further ado, I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, my name is AJ DeAndrea, and I am a retired deputy chief from Arvada, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver. Did 30 years there, retired May 1st, 2023. Throughout my career, and honestly, the reason why I'm here is because I just carry Madalena's bags as we travel across the country. Some of my experiences when she talks about the backdrop of her childhood, I had a very unique career involved in a lot of high-profile stuff. 3 school shootings. I was the D team leader on the first sweep through the center part of the building at Columbine High School. Shortly after that, found myself in the town of Granby, Colorado, where a man turned a bulldozer into a tank and destroyed the town. They made a couple goofy movies about that. Some of it breaks my heart because they turned this guy into a martyr. But it is what it is, right? Everybody has their choice, I guess. But shortly after that, about a year or so, my second school shooting, September 27, 2006, at Platte Canyon High School, which started out as an active shooting, but then turned into a hostage situation. I was a team leader of our blue team on our SWAT team there, and was third to make entry into the room, was about 3 feet from a young girl named Emily Keys as she was shot and killed, and the suspect was subsequently killed. Almost 3 months the date after that, another raging gunfight, which hit headlines. Rescuing a deputy was pinned down by gunfire down in Willow Springs, Colorado. And then my third school shooting, December 9th, 2007, at Youth with a Mission Missionary School, right here in Arvada, Colorado, where 4 people were shot. 2 were killed, unfortunately. I personally carried out a young girl named Tiffany, who'd been shot 11 times. She was alive when I put her in the ambulance. Went back in the building, carried out a young man named Philip Krause, who'd been shot 1 time in the liver. He was alive when I put him into the ambulance. Unfortunately, they both passed on the operating table, but the other 2 survived. Every one of these stories is tragic. He got away from us that night. He resurfaced about 12 hours later. The New Life Church in Colorado Springs, where he's going to kill 2 sisters before he takes his own life inside the church. And of course, a bunch of other crazy things throughout my career, 30 years, 16 spent on SWAT. Probably the best time of my life was running an impact team where we were playing clothes, going after some really high, dangerous folks. Still don't like me. And my last 5 years as deputy chief. And I don't think you realize the wake that those things create in the people that are around you in their lives. And I did the best that I could to try to protect them from, I was very open, very open and age appropriate, right?
Of course.
But the wake that those things create. And I realized that, and then I'm going to kick it over to Madalena, or you guys, however you want to go with this thing.
You're fine.
But I realized that I'd always told my daughters that, I would share certain information because these terrible things happen, right? And they're going to fill in the blanks. They are going to fill in the blanks. And so I would try to give them enough information that they kind of had a good understanding. But of course, I didn't go into a ton of detail, and not a ton of detail in my career, because you try to protect your loved ones. But I did tell them when they were 18, when they were an adult, they could ask me anything they wanted.
Oh, wow. I love
and
that.
At 18, both daughters took that, opportunity to do that. But Madalena, it was like a 6-hour conversation. Just going back, and it wasn't me prompting her. These were things that she remembered that she would bring up and she would bring up. And it was at that moment when for me, who always tried to be introspective but didn't realize, like I said, the weight, the gravity of it all, until we actually sat down and had that conversation, and her memory, asking me about things I had forgotten. Like, what? Oh yeah, wait, let's go back to that one, right? Yeah, so that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my career, but kick it back over to you guys or Madalena and kind of go from there.
Well, I already have so many questions. I guess the first question I do want to ask is just how did you have that wisdom to know, hey, I should be age appropriately open?
I was going to ask that too, because we talk about that all the time on here. I have to say that a lot in my presentations, like, it's okay. It's refreshing to hear it from you. So that's a great question, Jennifer.
I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever created anything myself, right? I don't necessarily have the wisdom to do that, but I have never been afraid to seek help and ask advice. And sometimes you get advice and it's like, nah, that's a little bit.
I'll keep asking.
The man that truly got me through my career is a man by the name of Dr. John Nicoletti. And not only is he my psychologist, but he's a dear friend of mine. He's a family friend. He's become a family friend. He did my pre-evaluation psych test in 93, getting hired on back at the agency. And I never hesitated to ask him questions and seek help, right, throughout my entire career, right? Always had that understanding. I guess that was one thing I was blessed with is, you keep yourself in top physical condition, especially on SWAT. If you want to stay on that to do the job. And so you preach the word, you need to live it. And I always talk about being prepared mind, body, and soul. And so when the mind or the soul was a little off, you talk to John and, you bring these beautiful babies into the world. And from, the cop's perspective, because we get jaded, the world's a nasty place.
Oh, yeah,
it's a much
absolutely.
more wonderful place now that I've retired.
Aw.
I like
You
people. I
suggest
like
that?
people a lot more, right? Yeah,
Okay,
I
look
highly
at
suggest
this.
it, right? Although I failed in retirement because I started a small company in 2014, a training and consulting company, and I'm busier now than I ever been. But it's my busy, right?
Yeah.
Mind, body, and soul being prepared. And like I said, you bring these two beautiful kids into the world and you want to protect them. You observe and you see folks' families and how people are adjusting and you want to try and do it right. And I didn't do it right all the time by any means. And it's definitely, stepped on a few mines in the minefield along the way. But his advice was, and you get this as well, when you get prepped for an officer-involved shooting, you talk to the psychologist or take classes on that, right? That people fill in the blanks unless you fill in them for them.
Mm-hmm.
And in speaking with, Dr. Nicoletti, he's like, listen, you need to give them enough information that because they always think it's worse than it is. It might be
Always.
terrible, right?
Yes.
It is terrible. I mean, some of the incidents I was involved in are absolutely horrific, but they'll make it 10 times that. And so try to keep them balanced with enough information, but not so much that it ruins their childhood, right? And
Right.
So it really was his advice that I took on real early because I didn't get on SWAT until 1996. And that's the year Madalena was born. She was born in May. And I shortly after that is when I got on the team. And I knew that, my family was going to walk the journey with me. An extended family, right? And friends that aren't in the profession. And so you share what you can. And again, that was really kind of his advice. And I've taken that to heart and always told the officers that were underneath me that wanted to have the conversation. Some don't, right? But I would give them that same advice of don't leave them out on an island because, again, they're going to make it 10 times worse. So share what we can without stealing their innocence. So.
And I think what that looked like in practice, I remember being very young and having, I think, the gift of those skill sets from a young age. And so it was never presented in a scary way. He would pull out his body armor and we could see how tough it was, right?
Yeah.
Or the tools that he was using. And I still in some ways think this, but as a child, right, I thought he was Superman. Like good is always going to conquer over evil. He has all these tools. He's so well trained. Like a lot of the information I got as a very young kid was just about all of these like tools and training and things, an age appropriate level that made him so equipped and so ready to go protect the people from the bad guys, right? And that was a lot of that initial information. So the framing of it was always this very empowered side. And then it was also about giving I think in some ways the initial inclination is like we want to protect our loved ones by not talking about the things that are going on. But the best possible thing my parents did for me from a very young age was giving me age appropriate dosing of scenarios that might be less than ideal, right? So we'd have small little 5-minute conversations at the dinner table about, hey, if this thing happens, what are you going to do? And it would be me and my little sister competing over who would have the better answer. And that's really, it was building out these neural pathways from a very young age of these little file folders, right? Where if this bad thing happens, I've already thought through how I'm going to respond to it. But it was always from this very empowered space, and it was never this scary thing that the world's this evil place. And as a result, many little tiny 5-minute conversations over the course of my childhood got me to a spot as a young adult where I was more, I don't want to say more equipped, everybody has their own experiences, but I felt highly equipped to handle whatever was thrown in front of me as a young adult. I felt very equipped to listen to myself. They were very big on the mindset that your safety is your responsibility. And so what that meant is that I could make decisions to keep myself safe. I didn't have to explain it to other people. I was empowered to do the things that were right for me. And really, as a young woman, that was teaching me to tune into my gut and my true north. And that became a crucial skill set, not even just for keeping myself safe, but also for decision making and, you know, just being true to myself in different environments that I was in growing up. And so I think it's those three different things combined. The framing of it's empowering, look at all these tools, these skill sets. Oh, I failed to mention also, we got to know the SWAT families. That was also really important. I thought the SWAT team was like, they were the coolest guys ever, right? Like I got to grow up around their kids. I got to be around them. Some of those men are like uncles to me still. But the reality of that growing up around his colleagues, like they've got it. Look at these really incredible people who are protecting my dad and he's protecting them and they're going to go take care of the bad guys. It was all framing from that lens. And then small pieces of those scenarios to help me start to be able to make good decisions. And really, it's also teaching decision making. And then also just small pieces of information about what he was going through. Because when you're a SWAT kid and you're being woken up by a pager, because it's 1996, right? 1999.
I remember those.
Oh, yes.
And you're being woken up by a pager and dad's running around trying to get his body armor and stuff to get out the door and you're trying to stay out of the way. That's scary. That framing of like, this is what he's going to do, and knowing that he was going to go protect people and that he was one of the good guys, that made it less scary and more of this thing that I was incredibly proud of. And so I think in practice, that's really what it looks like for me as a young kiddo and growing up. The other thing they were really good about is that when there was a critical incident that my mom knew he was responding to, or there was just something going on, the TV went off. So there wasn't this chance of like, I'm watching my cartoons and this news alert pops up and suddenly dad's on the news and I see his face, right? TV went off. They were really intentional about controlling information. So we got information, but it wasn't the news telling me what's going on or me
You
seeing
got it
that
from a trusted source in your parents. Yeah.
Exactly.
How important.
Which is,
I feel like the way you just articulated that was incredible.
Thank you.
I'm like, that's what I've been thinking this whole time. Like I talk about that and, you know, being a child of a first responder and I've given that speech, but I'm like, the way you just said it blew me out the water because it's hard to sometimes articulate, right? Like that notion of even growing up, I don't know if you experienced this where you had friends and you were like, why do they think so differently? Like, I would not do that. Like that is not something I would do. And even to this day, I say sorry to my husband, but like, there are things that he does when we're out in public, like in Chicago or something where I'm like, no, like, this is not how the world works. What are you doing? But I feel like you articulated it so much better than me. I'm just like, why are you like that? No, just kidding.
No, it's true though. And it's a different perspective on the world. And I think I really started to notice that around like middle and high school. I have this one distinct memory. We went downtown to go to dinner for my friend's birthday. We'd all just turned 16, or we were the age where we were allowed to drive with each other in cars. We went downtown, we had dinner for her birthday, and we were walking back, and the parking lot was really dark. And it was sketchy. And they were like walking towards the car. And I was like, hold on a second, like make sure there's nobody under the car or around the car. And they're like, what are you talking about, Madalena? Like they all freaked out. And then, but they to this day will sometimes reference that of like, I always check to make sure there's not something going on underneath my car or around my car before I get in it when it's a sketchy environment. Like to this day, you know, almost, I'm going to date myself now, but it was a while ago.
You're still the youngest one on the call. You're good.
Yeah. High school was a little bit ago. So.
But I love that use of that personal safety. I think that's incredible language to use. And that's exactly so empowering, that language, that that's your responsibility. And these are ways in which you utilize that.
That was always important, right? To let them know, to empower them, right? I mean, these are your kids, and to let them know that they have the right to make decisions in their life and not just kind of, walk around, in the herd, but they get a chance to break away if something isn't right.
Yeah.
And, just kind of a funny story. And I don't know, was it you or was it your sister with the MP5 bolt?
I think that was Elle. Yeah.
Well, just talk about chaos, right? So when I clean my guns, because I didn't want the guns to be scary, right? And of course, they learned gun safety growing up, and they would come and I'd give them a little part to scrub or whatever. It must have been her sister, but putting an MP5 back together, and I get a page, and I'd given her the job just to kind of clean the bolt.
It was her. Yeah.
And here's this page, and it's a bad deal, right? I got to go. And it's like, where's the bolt? She's like, I gave it back to you, Daddy. And I'm like, no, where's the bolt? I don't have the bolt, right? And I'm looking everywhere, bop, bop, bop. And sure enough, it was in my shirt pocket over here. But, just some of the chaos, right? Of some of those days. Some of that I miss, and some of it I'm so glad it's gone.
But I do think that from that lens, like the greatest gifts they gave us when it comes to, intangible things is the ability to trust myself, make decisions, and really believe that I have agency even in the most horrific situations.
Yeah. And you try to, just like yourself going through the profession, and sometimes it takes a while there's so much scrutiny, right? But ultimately teaching them that really the one that they have to answer to is themselves.
Yeah. Of
course, the parents, you're going to have to, if it's a bad thing, you got to answer. But, in those critical, when you're making those decisions, they're not about anybody else really, but it's about you. And, as long as you get up the next morning, look in the mirror, know that you made the right decision that you can live with, right? Then we're not here to please everyone around us, especially when it comes to safety. Yeah. So
that's incredible. That's incredible parenting, but especially through that lens of first responding, when you are responding to things and you never know what that page is going to be. And there can be so much unknown, to say we still have choices in our lives. We still have some authority in our own personal decisions. When we spoke before, you had kind of mentioned mental health, and we talked briefly about, man, it's great to hear that in your career, mental health was being something that you talked about, as well as, having 30 years of a career, because obviously Ashlee and I talk a lot more about mental health today, and my dad's experience of mental health, and, he's been retired for 20 years. So tell me a little bit about how mental health showed up for you in your career, even early on.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story, I guess. And, in the beginning, we didn't talk about mental health really. It was kind of that thing. And now almost, I think in 2025, 2026, we might be talking about it a little bit too much, because I think the officers feel like they've had enough over the last 5 years. So
I do think we are making people drink through a fire hose of mental health at this point. Yes.
Yeah. So there has to be a way to bring some buoyancy to it without pushing it aside. Right. And I'll get to that, because I think that comes into culture. But we were involved. I got on SWAT in 96, and we were involved in some pretty high profile things. But really the turning point for me would have been Columbine. And after Columbine, like immediately after, I participated in the first 2 sweeps. They pulled us into Leawood Elementary, and you stood there in one line. If you shot your gun, if you didn't shoot your gun, you stood in another line. And when it was your turn, you step in, crime scene people take your photos. You walk down the hallway, you gave your statement to the investigators, and then they put us in a room where I'd been in these hot washes before with Dr. Nicoletti, because like I said, we've been through quite a few things prior to that. But he gives you, kind of the speech of, hey, this is a big one. Might be bigger than some of the stuff you guys been in before.
Yeah.
In the first 24 hours, first 72 hours, these are things you should be experiencing, blah, blah, blah. Be good to have a follow-up meeting in about 2 weeks, and then be on a schedule, maybe a month, 2 months, 6 months, year mark. And then if there's any other needs in between, come to our office and, we'll kind of work through all that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. I wasn't really struggling too much at that point. But again, that's like right after, right? You got all that adrenaline still and all those chemicals all those hormones still coursing through your veins.
Yeah.
And then I was on an island, because our SWAT team is a regional team. So it was Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Arvada. So the team was created in 96. I was an original member on the team. Golden was authorized to be on there. They did not have, it took them some time, a few years, to be able to get somebody onto the team to meet the physical fitness standards. And there were only 2 of us left. 3 guys got on the team in 96. By Columbine, there was only 2. One of those individuals was a sniper, so he never made entry into the building. So I was really the only person from Arvada that made entry. Mm-hmm. And it's a collateral duty team. We would get together every 2 weeks to train or a call out. But really, so I'm kind of at Arvada by myself on this island and don't have a lot of my peers there to be able to kind of lean on and kind of work through some of this stuff. Shortly after the hot wash with Dr. Nicoletti, it was pretty much made clear to us that if we went and sought mental health support, it kind of showed we were weak. Yeah. And we didn't want to show the community that we were weak. And so there was this big taboo kind of on it, right? Now, I'm my own person. I kind of do what I'm going to do. And sometimes that's not the greatest thing in the world. But I would see Dr. Nicoletti because in my mind, it's like, listen, you know, I truly believe in the profession. And again, I truly believe mind, body, and soul, right? You twist your ankle, you go see a doctor. My head and heart weren't right after Columbine. And so I would lean on him. But I noticed a lot of the guys were really suffering. And factually, within about 3 years of Columbine, we lost about 75% of our team. Guys left the team. They just didn't want to deal with the ridicule. Again, we were sued. I was sued 15 times. I was on everything disappeared but one. I was on a 5-year federal gag order. Those are, you know, just miserable to live through. And I remember on the year mark of Columbine, still lived in Arvada at the time. I was sitting on my deck. Don't hold this against me, all right? I'm drinking a glass of bourbon and I'm smoking a cigar.
I'm from Kentucky. You got the good stuff.
Yeah, right?
And I was crying. Called the guys that were, I was on a small element that broke off from the main element. Called the guys that were on that element with me just to check in on them. And you could tell they were really upset. And I'm like, this is jacked up. This isn't right. Yeah. And I told myself that day that if I ever got into a position of influence, I was going to try to change that because the attitude at the time was wrong, right? And the bravado and the, you know, all that crap. And again, watching some of my dear friends, guys that I admired, really, really struggling. So fast forward to Platte Canyon. And a lot of things happened between 1999 and 2006. But this would have been probably the most high profile thing that took place during that time. And then I was in a position of influence. And I will tell you the attitude about mental health had kind of changed in the profession as well by then, at least a little bit. We had a whole new program set up. And some of this was the agency, and then some of this was me pushing. By then, we kind of were listening to Dr. Nicoletti. And so we had it set up that you would do the hot wash, you would have check-ins with him throughout the year, additional ones if you needed them. And we opened the contract up to families. So if you're directly involved and you notice your child or your significant other is starting to struggle, they could see Dr. Nicoletti's office as well. It seemed to be, you know, you saw that change, right? And we seemed to be a little bit healthier. For me, and I know for the guys on the team and guys that I've worked with, not everybody, right? Because everybody's a little bit different. But the year mark those are always difficult. Yeah. Especially, I mean, we were 3 feet from this girl. There was a lot of guys, we were 3 feet from her when she was shot and killed. You know, listen to the negotiations, right? Because they were yelling through the wall. It wasn't done on any throw phones or any of that stuff. So really, it was a devastating event. I remember it was about 7 months after I had gotten invited to go to LAPD to do the debrief of Platte Canyon for the entire Metro Division. And the invitation came from a man by Mike Odell, who was he was a LA SWAT team leader for years. He retired a couple of years ago as a captain with the LAPD, but he really was kind of my tactical mentor, right? A guy that, you know, you could lean on, and they're operating at a much higher level than we were. I mean, we're a major metropolitan SWAT team, but what they're doing was tenfold.
Yeah.
So he invited us out, and at dinner that night, I remember having a conversation with him, and I'm like, Mike, I'm worried about the team. We've got mental health support, but I'm starting to see some of the same things that, you know, I saw back when Columbine happened. And now I was a sergeant, right? You know, Columbine I was just a slick sleeve. Platte Canyon, so as a sergeant, you've got a little bit more sphere of influence. Not a lot, but you got a little bit, right? I could see, like I said, some of those issues coming, and I'm like, listen, I need to do something different. We've got the mental health support, but there's still issues out there, and I always worry about the year mark because those weigh heavy on people. Yeah. And he's like, well, you need to do something. He's like, why don't you do a run? And I think he was thinking a 10K, right? In honor of this little girl and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I always think bigger than that. And so I went back and I kind of processed this, and I'm like, you know what, we are going to do a run. But we're going to do a run from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office to Platte Canyon High School, which is 38 miles.
Wow.
And in honor of her. And, you know, you look at, I'm not saying that that's what everybody needs to do, but when you're looking at, if you know your people, and we were very physically fit, motivated. That was a high part, you know, whenever we were together, the first part of the day, we're working out. You worked out harder on your days off so that when you showed up for the team workout, you know, so that was a big thing for us. So I'm not saying that everybody, you find that thing that your people gravitate to. Of course, I had asked permission from the father of the little girl because they were doing a motorcycle rally for her. And I'm like, hey, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, go ahead. And I'm not going to bore you with all the trials and tribulations, but it took a lot of fighting to get the state of Colorado to allow us to run on a highway, 38 miles. But we ended up doing that. And we ran the first 5 miles in formation, and then you ran for 10 minutes in tack order. But it gave us time as a team that we switched our mentality. Idea popped into my head in April. And so it let us train together in a different way, to be together, to stay focused, to be there for one another, to be able to lean on one another, all the way up till September 27th, until this run. And so you really kind of saw change in everybody, and it kind of gave us a focus. I was a little bit stubborn. To be able to do that run, you had to be present that day, whether it was the SWAT team, support, negotiators. If you were on the SWAT team and you were on the beach in Cabo when this event happened, guess what? You're not running.
Yeah. Right.
And if you were a patrol officer and you wanted to come run just to run, you weren't running.
Right.
And that's because I understood the guys, right? If you put one person that wasn't there, that didn't have that experience, and you get this bravado from the SWAT guys, oh man, rough, tough, you know, SWAT guy. Versus the guys that were just there, and gals that were there that day, you could lean on one another. You could cry, you could laugh, you could joke. And it was a much more healthier environment. The only thing that was different to that, about 2 weeks before it happened, Emily that was killed, she had a twin brother, Casey. Her father, John Michael, called me and said, hey, my son's having a rough year. He heard about your run. Can he run with you? So we allowed him to run, right? And so had full support from the leaders at the time. And this is kind of the point that I'm getting to here. I'm going to speed up because I know that this isn't what the entire podcast is about. But full support from the chief of police at the time, Ron Sloan, the sheriff, Ted Mink. And again, I had to fight a lot of battles because, like I said, Department of Transportation wasn't going to give me a permit, but we figured that out. It was a much healthier, and the guys will tell you it was probably one of the most cathartic experiences.
It has to be.
Right?
Yes.
So then let's fast forward to YWAM. Again, the mental health support was there, but kind of that more humanistic side, that other part, right? And so this would have been a much shorter run. It would have been a run from Arvada PD's headquarters to where Youth with a Mission was, which is about 5 miles, so not bad. So I started to plan the same thing. The dispatchers, patrol, anybody that was there that night that responded. But leadership had changed. And this is when we start to talk about mental health and leading and understanding your people. Leadership had changed. And the leadership at that time was, we're going to lead the run. And I'm like, sir, you weren't there. This ain't about you. It's not about the command staff. It's not about that. If you're there, it is going to be a totally different dynamic than the one that we want to accomplish by the guys and gals that were there that night, to let them just be together. There's going to be a vigil. You can speak. You can be the face at the vigil, do your thing. And of course, they told me, well, there's other people that want to run. I said, hey, that's great, but not this night, right? And this was not good for me in my career because I kind of stuck to my guns. Believe it or not, I had to go to anger management classes because I didn't like my responses. But it went the way they wanted. And it created so much dissent within the agency, created a lot of problems that didn't manifest for maybe, a year or two. And so that whole leadership concept is huge, right? To understand that it's not about, there's times where you have to be in front as the leader, and there's times where you have to be there and handle the tough questions and be visible. But there's times where, hey man, you got to step back and let your people do your thing, right?
Absolutely.
And so it really kind of set us back. But you still are always trying to figure out, how can we do it better? How can we do it better, right? And, we were going through some tough times. Right about the time I made deputy chief, we had 2 officers, not our personal officers, but in the state of Colorado, we had 2 officers killed like within 2 weeks of one another. That's a different generation that are all police officers now. Their families are concerned. We start to do things to try to, help the family members, kind of like what we did with the SWAT team. Bring them in, let the family see our equipment, let them understand our training, let them do all that type of stuff. we were still suffering. And I was going through, I think it was Northwestern's 10-week police staff and command course or whatever, and I had to do a staff study on something. And I wanted to look at our mental health, not our mental health program, but our reintroduction back to the agency after an incident happened, and looked at what some of the more progressive agencies were doing across the country. Denver Police Department was one of them that I leaned on, a couple other different programs, and created a reintegration 3-prong program that I'm very, very proud of. And when I went to the FBI National Academy, I presented it. The FBI has taken it. Now they're changing a few things, and that's a beast of an organization, but they're adapting it. And I've had a lot of agencies across the country adapt it, but kind of changes. So we're talking about mental health, but it changes the way that we bring someone back after a critical incident. I can remember some of the ones that I was involved in, or my buddies that were involved in, where, you're involved in this incident, they send you home, and you're just sitting there. And after Platte Canyon, they told us it was a dirty shoot. And so, they think, and we were cleared. It was just one of those deals in the very beginning. But you're sitting there and you're wondering what's going to happen, and you're waiting for the phone to ring. And, sometimes it's 6 weeks to 8 weeks, you know how it goes, right? And when they're left to their own devices and their mind's racing, you see guys drinking more, they're doing this, there's these maladaptive things that are taking place. This program, what it does is it's 3-pronged. One is an administrative program, but my main part was I wanted to bring the officers back to the agency as quickly as possible. I wanted them to be resocialized after the event, back at home with their agency, not sitting on an island wondering what's going on, what's going to happen to my career, what's actually taking place. So that program, the administrative side, once we kind of, to get the thumbs up from the district attorney's office that this is a good shoot, it's going to take us 6 weeks to get this thing all cleaned up, but this is a good shoot. And this actually blossomed into other things, which I'll share with you. We bring you back to the agency, and I'm not going to put you to work. I'm not going to, assign you a desk job taking phone reports, because that's my life punishment. So one of the precursors was you get it removed from your command, and you're responsible to the administrative commander. Because the administrative commander, what they're concerned about is your welfare. If you were still attached to a patrol commander, hey, let's just put them on desk duty. They can answer phones all night long, and we can relieve, and that's not the experience I wanted. But so you get the thumbs up. A couple other critical things had to be taken care of. You had to make sure that you were checking in with the mental health professionals, had to have your gear back. And then at the end of this, you had to ride with a partner before we'd let you go on your own. But prong 2 is where it got interesting. And we call this kind of departmental development. So let's say you're an officer, a young officer on patrol when this happened. We bring you back. And again, I don't want to put you to work. I want to give you some experiences. And so depending on how long the investigation was going to go, but let's just say it's a 4-week one. So you get to pick for your first 2 weeks back a place that you're not assigned to, where you get to go shadow that's part of the agency and kind of see the realities. So cool. See the realities of what that is. So maybe you're interested in our crime scene investigators. Maybe it's investigations. Maybe it's the academy. Maybe it's recruiting. Maybe it's one of our task force. But you get to come back. You're not sitting at home wondering what's going on. You're back. You're being resocialized. And you get to go experience that. Now, if you're with one of the task force and they have to do a tactical intervention, you can't go on that, right? Right. You have to sit that one out. But you got to go experience this part of the agency that you would never experience for about 2 weeks. And then you got to pick another one. Right? Because typically these things are done in about 6 weeks, and it takes about 2 weeks to kind of get you cleared back into the agency. If it drug on longer, then you could go to another one. Mm-hmm. The 3rd prong, we kind of called it a tactical pause on your life, and it's more of a holistic thing. And the list, by the time I left, the list was, as long as that back wall behind me. But things that you've never done before, or things that you think you might need in your life, again, that you want some support on, we would open that door for you. So maybe you wanted to see a financial specialist because you're one of those guys that's getting prepared for retirement, right? Maybe you wanted to see a dietitian. Maybe you wanted a workout program. Maybe you wanted equine therapy. You heard about that and you thought that might be cool, something just to calm your life. Maybe you wanted cryotherapy, vibroacoustic therapy. You wanted trauma-informed massage. Let's say a new life experience. You wanted to do a float trip down the Colorado River fishing. We have groups that we would partner with that. There's a place in Golden Gate Canyon where you could take your family for a house for a week that's patrolled by a different agency, and you get to totally decompress, kind of check out a little bit. You never shot pheasants before. Now, if you were an avid pheasant hunter, I'm not going to send you to a pheasant farm, but you've never done that and you want a new experience, right? Had guys that wanted to learn how to rock climb. All right. And these were all kind of community partnerships, were either given to us at a discount that the agency paid for, or they were free. And these aren't gratuities, right? These are just partnerships that we entered in with the community
Right.
And again, the list is, as long as it made sense and it wasn't something crazy kooky, we would authorize it and say, let's let you experience something new in your life, right? While we're kind of walking through this. Then we opened it up to maybe someone that's just going through some other type of trauma. We had 2 officers at our own agency shot and killed in a 15-month period. I had a couple other incidents at the agency that were very traumatic, and you could see people were struggling. So, all right, we'll bring you into the reintegration program, help you kind of work through that.
Wow.
And it was interesting for me because it's like any other thing in this profession. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Always.
Yep.
Those that were open-minded were really, really appreciated it. Those that were closed-minded, once they got into it, they seemed to appreciate it. There's a few naysayers, right, that just wanted to sit at home. I just want to sit at home, leave me alone. But the senior guys that had gone through that or that had a little bit of time on the job would come into my office and say, thank you. I wish we'd have been doing this through my entire career.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know what it looks like now that I've left the agency. These things change and they grow and they do what they do. They get their own legs. But so going from where it was taboo to get mental health to then pushing out this other program over here to say, hey, it is what it is, and let's just work through it and let's take advantage of maybe some of this time and try to make you whole the best way that we can. So that's kind of my journey on mental health.
Well, that's an incredible one. And I just have to say, those runs that were so purposeful and so protected, and what you're saying in terms of shift and change. And I wanted to talk a little bit about shift and change. Madalena, I know you had said when we talked before about some shift and change in terms of resiliency and then using the language of post-traumatic growth. And so I don't know if you would be interested in sharing a little bit about that experience for you, especially, it was an incredible story about changing a whole agency's look at mental health, but, specifically an individualized experience of that.
Absolutely. I think to start, as you just heard, my dad really explain his experience with supporting an agency's mental health. In the backdrop of all of that, he was supporting his own mental health. Continue with those conversations with Dr. Nicoletti, really making Dr. Nicoletti a part of our family's life. He was someone who came over for dinners or came to graduation parties. He was a part of our community. And as a result of that, my dad was modeling for me my whole life what it meant to go seek that support, not realizing he was doing it for me, right? He was doing it for the agency. He was doing it for his fellow officers. He was doing it for himself so he could continue on with his career. All with me observing, though, that he was taking that step, that it just became a norm. So then when my experience happened, during borderline, as everything kicked off, I ended up actually in the attic above where the shooting was occurring. So I was in the building for the totality of the incident. Throughout that experience, my dad and I were texting back and forth as he was telling me what was happening over the radio and what dispatch was telling him. And I was telling him what was happening inside of the building. And so we actually have this text string kind of documenting the experience, which has been really powerful. And when we do when we do much larger presentations together, we actually play those messages so people can really understand the full extent of my experience to the degree that's possible through text messages. Even just looking at those messages, you can see that my mindset in that moment was that I had agency. The most helpless situation I've ever been in and the most helpless I've felt, I still had this reality that my safety was my responsibility. I had agency. There was decisions I could make to help myself. Being able to communicate gave me a sense of control and little ways I could protect myself and get more information and make better decisions. And as the aftermath started for me, as I got out of the attic, as I got out, that first 24-hour period was really a blur for me. I couldn't sleep. I was having, normal cortisol reactions. I did not feel safe for a very long time. Now, mind you, as soon as I got out, I sent my dad a text that said I'm outside safe with SWAT. And he was immediately on a flight from Denver to LAX. So really, when he got to Los Angeles and he was hugging me at my apartment door, that's the first time I really started to feel safe. And that's where I mark when I transitioned from really responding to what was happening to when I started healing, because that was the first moment I actually felt safe after everything had occurred. And really what my mental health journey has looked like from that point moving forward, because my dad had modeled for me my whole life what it meant to seek that support, it wasn't a question for me whether or not I was also going to go get that support now that this thing had happened to me. And so actually within 48 hours of the experience, a doctor from Dr. Nicoletti's office, her name's Dr. Kay Coleman, she was actually up at our family home And I had my first session with her in our family office. He was coordinating that in the backdrop. They initially thought maybe I should meet with Dr. Nicoletti. And they're like, hold on a second. She's a 20-something girl. Maybe we should have somebody a little bit closer to her age. She's a little bit more relatable. So I thought Katie would be a better fit. And she's great. But she came up to our family home and I sat in our family office and told her everything that had happened. And as she was leaving, I walked to the door. My dad was walking her down the steps to her car. And to this day, I don't know if she knows I heard her say this to him, but she looked at him and said, she's going to be okay. And in that moment, I sure did not feel like that.
Right.
I was really mentally, the best way I can describe it is like being at the very bottom of a dark hole. And unlike in the bar where there was a ladder for me to climb up into the attic to safety, there was no ladder out of this mental space, which was a really terrifying spot to be in. And so I made a promise to myself. Once I kind of had that realization that I didn't want to stay in that mental space, I made a promise to myself that I was not only going to heal, but I was going to be the best version of myself in spite of what I had gone through. And I actually have a journal entry that I wrote when I made the promise to myself that day. It was 6 days after the tragedy. And what that looked like for me practically to get to a spot now 7 years later where I can confidently say I've experienced post-traumatic growth. Was taking baby steps. I'm not going to lie to you all or to your listeners and say that was an easy process, because it was not. But once I made that decision, I started to look for little ways to take back my sense of safety. And I started with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and really focusing on that bottom layer of the pyramid. I got crazy good at getting enough sleep, eating foods that made me feel good and helped reduce anxiety, taking little opportunities to take back my sense of safety. And one of the big ways I did that actually was really handling one of my major triggers. So one of the biggest triggers for me was up in the attic. It was very dark. There were gunshots in the bar. So every time I would be in a dark environment, I would hear those gunshots over and over and over again. And so that makes it really hard to go to sleep. When you close your eyes to go to bed and all you're hearing is gunshots in your head, it's hard to go to bed. And that meant I wasn't functioning like a normal adult after a lot of time of sleep deprivation. So I went to Katie and I was like, I think I want to go get my CCW. I need to take control of this sound. Like, it is tormenting me. I can't just be in this space anymore where it's consuming my brain. And I was kind of half expecting her to go, I don't know if that's such a great idea. But she actually really encouraged it. And so I went with my dad and one of the men, Mike Tetchton, who's like an uncle to me, who was on the SWAT team with my dad and on the job with him for his career. And they put me through the 40-hour post-level, law enforcement level firearms course, and I got my CCW. And the reason I share that specific experience was because it was the first moment I really realized that I had control over taking back my sense of safety. Because as soon as I took that step, I was able to sleep. I wasn't being tormented by that sound anymore. And so that really sparked something in me where I got tenacious about learning about what was going on with my brain, about learning about my body, about learning about health, about taking any of those triggers as an opportunity to take back that sense of control and to reclaim that experience for my own safety, my own agency. And that, little tiny baby steps over time, viewing this thing that's popping up in my brain, this trigger, instead of it being like, this is a terrifying thing, why is it popping up? I didn't realize this was going to bug me. I established the mindset that my brain finally feels safe enough for this thing to pop up, and that means it's time to heal it.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so it was a gift when a trigger would pop up.
Yeah.
I realized, like, okay, A, go brain. We're finally safe enough that we can heal this thing. And B, now I know it's there. So let's do what I can to heal it. About 2 years into my experience, I found emotional freedom technique, and I worked with a practitioner. Her name's Tiffany Jeffers. She's worked with Navy SEALs. She's incredible. Been in this space for a long time, but that particular modality was really helpful for me in taking out the emotional charge of a lot of my triggers, the things that just were activating for me and popping up in everyday life, and things I didn't realize I was kind of had adjusted to and the ways I was operating as a result of the tragedy. And from there, I just got tenacious about learning and about giving back. That's when I worked in school safety about a year later. That's when I first started my role in school safety. And that experience, being able to give the skill sets and mindsets that I had learned growing up and that I had been gifted to our most valuable members of society, our children, right? Our most valuable resource, our kiddos, giving them those skill sets and mindsets to stay safe was an incredibly healing part of my journey for me, because it felt like I was bringing purpose out of this incredible evil that had been inflicted on me. And then I got to a spot where I started to talk about it. And that I took a lot of time because I didn't want to talk about my experience until I could do so from a space of healing and recovery and resiliency. So I wanted to steward that experience well. But once I got to that point, being able to share with other people that even on that darkest night, even in that most horrible moment, even in the situations you have no control over, there is a light on the other end of that tunnel. And if I can be an example of, there is post-traumatic growth that can be a reality even after the most horrific things. I know everybody's story, and I'm lucky to say that's been mine, but it is an option that we often don't hear about. Oftentimes we think about trauma and the next thing we hear is PTSD. And my experience has been one where I was at this point, this bad thing happens, but I am now have fulfilled that promise to myself, and I am better than where I was at prior to it happening.
Yes.
And that can be other people's reality as well. And so, that is a little bit of what my journey has looked like. But I've also been incredibly intentional about when those triggers come up or when something else, unlayers itself, I face it. And I brought this incredible team of people around me. So Dr. Katie Coleman was the first people, I call my growth team, but she was the first person on my growth team.
I love that.
But every time this new kind of level comes up where it's something that I realize I don't have the skills to navigate or I could use some support to handle, I think as children, we're so apt to take support from coaches and mentors and teachers. And for whatever reason, as we become adults, we start to believe that we aren't allowed to have that kind of support. And I really reject that mindset. I think if you can bring somebody into your life to help you navigate when things get difficult or when you're reaching this next chapter that you don't know how to navigate and somebody else has navigated it before you, to have those people in your corner is a cheat code. It's a hack. And I'm going to pull as many people in as I can to help me navigate and give me that wisdom. And so I've developed this team over time to also help me when there are moments that me just choosing isn't enough, right? I need somebody else to come and help me navigate.
Absolutely.
Now you know why what I do is carry her bags.
Gosh, you're not wrong here. She's pretty incredible, huh?
Yes,
but also that stems from you too. And both of you guys have such an incredible, powerful story. I'm honestly, I was sitting here and the funniest thing, I'm sure you have a podcast. I want you to mention that. I don't know if you've ever had that moment. I just had that where I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, hell, how do I respond to this? It's just so good. There's nothing I can say. I'm inspired. I'm in awe right now. You guys are both incredible. And I think from my point of view with all of this, how do you guys with traveling, with sharing your story, do you guys have anything that you guys do together that's kind of just off the table, father, daughter, what do you guys do for fun together? This is totally left field, but my brain is how do you guys stay connected in different ways?
Our family's very ritualistic about Sunday dinner. So, and we've been doing that since I was left for college. So my sister and I come up every Sunday with our whole families together and we just have a meal and dessert and we hang out, we talk about our week. And that has been a norm since we became adults. So I think we connect weekly no matter what, unless someone's traveling, but most of the time it's pretty consistent. And I don't know, I think that more than pretty much anybody else I know, my dad and I share a very similar ethos about the world and outlook on life. And so I think we just connect naturally. It's not that we have hobbies per se, but I just I'll see a video on Instagram and I'm going to send it to him or something pops up and I'm going to call him and talk to him about it because he's one of the people I look up to the most in the world. Right. And so it's not that we have fun things we do. I just enjoy spending time with him.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we have a tradition when we travel that, the night before, try to just be her and I. And I know that, the hosts always want you to be with them and we try to manage that the best we can, but we'll get a steak dinner.
Yeah.
And
love this. Just
spend time together. And those are, I travel a lot. I go all over. And my favorite trips is when she gets to come with me.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Pretty cool moments.
Well, that's how I got to invite you guys on the podcast, is because of one of your trips. And I'll give my dad a shout out. So he was at the FBI conference over the summer. He got to sit through your guys' incredible program and immediately told me that I needed to reach out, and I think, has harassed both of you on my behalf. So I have to thank my dad for that. But could you guys share a little bit about your program? What you presented maybe at the FBI? And I know when we had spoken before, I hope I get this title right, but the Dark Night of the Soul, I believe, AJ, is what you said. Some of this is based on, I don't know, I think that would be good for our listeners to know if that's a book that you enjoy. Tell us a little bit about your program.
I'll start and then I'll let kind of Madalena kind of clean it up. It is titled Dark Nights of the Soul. And there is a book out there written by Thomas More that I was actually working on a project with the FBI. We did Echoes of Columbine, and then we did the aftermath. And these are things you can go to the Department of Justice and you can get, the CDs for free, kind of for agencies or for individuals. But we were working on that, and one of the producers there had mentioned the book Dark Nights of the Soul and said, hey, it might be something you might want to read because that's the life you're living. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? But I actually did go and then get that book. Yeah. And what it talks about, just kind of in a nutshell, is on your darkest night, whatever it is, it's an officer-involved shooting, you're getting a divorce, you're getting sued, you lose a loved one, whatever that tragedy is in your life, right? Which is, different for all of us. Mm-hmm. If you can find that kind of one ray of light to focus on and move towards that you have the opportunity, if you're true to yourself and keep moving forward, you have the opportunity to move into post-traumatic growth, and you have the opportunity to change kind of the outcome. And literally in the presentation, when I'm talking to law enforcement, when we talk about our 8 pillars, pay attention to that, you focus on that, you have the opportunity to change the world, truly, right? When we look at this thing in its full depth. Reading the book, and then in full disclosure, created a program, Dark Nights of the Soul, with a dear friend of mine, a man by the name of John McDonald, who used to be the executive director of school safety for Jefferson County Public Schools. He's the one that brought Columbine back together after that event happened. He's now in Missouri for the Center of School Safety and Leadership. We created, and he's responded, not boots on the ground in the building like I did to school shootings, but more school shootings than me on the management of these events, after the fact. Right. And created this program. The first time we did it was in the J. Edgar Hoover building in FBI in DC, broadcasted across the world to all the FBI agents. And it was kind of a powerful thing, right? Well, then Madalena's event happens. And again, it took some time. There was no pressure on me. I didn't put any pressure on her. The only thing that I told her was, listen, we might be victimized, but we're not going to be a victim. Absolutely. We're not going to live our lives as a victim. Right. You figure out how to navigate that, girl. But we've been victimized, but we're not going to live our lives as a victim, right? And so as she is growing and she's adapting, and some of my tactical classes that I teach is when she first started opening up, talking about her experiences to the responders and the SWAT guys, she got to a point where she's like, hey, I can do this with you. So really, Dark Nights of the Soul is either me, myself, or with John McDonald, or with her. And 99% of the time it's with her, because that's a much more powerful thing. And John would agree with that, and he pushes her that way as well. Yeah. The program that your father saw it's a 4-hour presentation at the FBI National Academy, that national conference. It was only 90 minutes. What it is we look at the events that I went through, or at least the 3 school shootings, because there's not enough time to go through all of them, right? And typically what we talk about when you're in those events are the bad things that happened, that type of stuff, right? Which we have to, right? Because you're trying to prepare people to do things better. This program's 180 degrees from that. We look at the event and then what good came from it. Mm-hmm. And typically I'll talk about in the lines of decision-making, tactics, and mental health. And so I kind of briefly talk about Columbine, the good that came from it, and then Platte Canyon, the good that came from it within that parameter. And then YWAM, which then opens the door for Madalena to step in and then talk about her experience. So I'll let her kind of take it from here.
Yeah, so the last hour of that 4-hour chunk is really me talking about the backdrop of my childhood with the experiences he just goes through those first 3 hours. So talking about how they impacted me, what protective factors I got growing up as a result of that childhood experience, and how those protective factors then prepared me for that day. And I go through basically my experience surviving the borderline bar girl shooting. I talk about what was going on with my body, what was going on with my brain. We watch the text messages and the radio traffic, the news coverage, and then we talk about what healing and resiliency has really looked like for me. So I give a very authentic, it's not pretty, the reality of what that aftermath actually looks like for me, and how now 7 years later I've gotten to a space of post-traumatic growth. And I walk through the things that I prioritized, the things that were hard for me, the things that actually helped. And really then we leave our audience with these experiences that were the worst day of my life, some of the worst days of his, but the good things that have come from them. And really that dark night of the soul mentality that even on those worst days, even in those worst experiences, that good can come from it.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
It is incredible. I don't want to, I know time-wise, I don't want to make you guys stay all night, because I absolutely would. I think Jennifer would too. I see both of our brains going, so I'm like, uh-oh. But can you give us a little bit about your podcast, so I don't want to miss the opportunity to hype that up?
Oh, sure. And I appreciate that. It's called the Centurion's Path. And so one day I was just got a thought in my mind. It's like, I called my buddy John. I said, we need to do a podcast. He's like, what the hell's a podcast? Right. And we started to navigate those waters. And really what it is kind of talk about the trials and tribulations of first responders. Depending on, there's never a script. The last year or so, we've really talked about mental health and some of those challenges. We're moving away from that just a little bit, but mental health is always a part of everything, right? So we kind of push into that. And here in the last 6 months, we brought, Madalena mentioned Mike Touchton, a dear friend of mine. He's more of a brother than anything, who's still on the job back at Arvada. We brought him on as a co-host as well. And it's really just kind of talking about life, and being able to do it from a position of retired deputy chief, where I don't got to answer to a mayor, I don't got to answer to a city council, and can be a little freer, but again, still respectful. But it's been fun, and I'm going to here live with you guys. I'm going to throw the invitation out because we'd like to bring you guys on and have a conversation about what you guys are doing and about your podcast as well. So when we're done, don't hang up, because I want to look at some dates.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited, honored, honestly, to even be invited on yours.
Yeah, well, the honor's ours for sure.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it is. And we've been a little bit lazy here this fall. I had surgery on my shoulder, and so we're due to get one done here pretty quick. And we try to do one every 2 weeks, but this fall has been really flat when life gets in the way. But would be honored to bring you guys on. And, who knows where the conversation is going to go. Like I said, nothing scripted. It's just talking about life and this profession and the bizarreness of it and the beauty of it and the tragedy of it sometimes. So, yeah.
And I don't want to be, too Pollyanna a little bit, but, just to think that I remember my dad saying, again, shout out to Lieutenant Woosley, but I don't even need to go to this conference. I don't know why I'm going, but I'm going to go. And, here we are with this conversation and it feels very special. And
Yes.
I have been very moved by both of your stories and appreciate just, number one, giving us of your time, but being just so open and sharing about those experiences and this incredible program that you have. And I'm happy to hear the FBI is taking advantage of that. And I know others will want to take advantage of it as well. I'll let Ashlee go ahead and take us away. But again, just thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you guys for your time. This was incredible. I know our listeners are going to want more, so I'm so thrilled that we have all your guys' information. And I'm like, wait, when do you guys present next? I'm coming front row. So thank you. I really am. I'm going to be there. So thank you guys so much. And we always end ours the same way. So when the call hits home, Jennifer and I are here for you, and we cannot wait to share this episode. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Absolute honor.